of entrepreneurship, education, employment, investment, and healthcare. And now I am so pleased to be able to engage in a fireside chat with President Ron Daniels, who I invite onto the to this panel stage. And I'm going to give you his bio and introduction, not do justice to it, because we are going to engage in a rich discussion where we're going to learn more about him, more about his book, more about his leadership, which really, I think, in many ways embodies economic justice and his work that he's done. Ronald J. Daniels is the 14th president of Johns Hopkins University since 2009. Under his leadership, Johns Hopkins has continued its preeminence in education, patient care, and innovative discovery. His leadership has focused on several key areas: strengthening interdisciplinary collaboration in research and education, enhancing student access, deepening engagement with the city of Baltimore, and supporting economic and social innovation. Long, he has been a champion of reducing barriers to participation in higher education by students from diverse and low socioeconomic backgrounds. He committed the university at his installation to enhancing its financial aid program and building Need Blind. Following a landmark gift from alumnus Michael Bloomberg, he has now made Johns Hopkins permanently need blind and no loan for all undergraduate students. That actually deserves like a round of applause in and of itself, which has had Johns Hopkins dramatically increase its diversity and academic excellence, which now ranks among one of the most diverse student bodies in the nation. With the aim to make similar progress in its graduate ranks, Johns Hopkins recently launched the $150 million Vivian Thomas Scholars Initiative to expand pathways for underrepresented minority scholars in STEM PhD program. President Daniels often says Johns Hopkins is truly and proudly of Baltimore. And this public commitment has fueled a myriad of initiatives, many of which I am so glad to be able to have his leadership and be able to be a part of. One being the construction and operation of the Henderson Hopkins School as the first new school built in East Baltimore in more than 20 years. Hopkins Local, a major economic inclusion effort through the Johns Hopkins University and health system. And under this program, over 1,400 residents have been able to be hired as Johns Hopkins colleagues from some of the city's most diverse and impoverished neighborhoods. President Daniels is the author of the recently published What Universities Owe Democracy. That's going to be the subject of our conversation today, which takes up the challenge facing democracy and argues for the indispensable role the universities play in sustaining democratic societies at this critical moment in history. With that, without further ado, so glad to have you on, Ron, and have you as a part of this fireside chat today.
So, Alicia, just thrilled to be here. I know this was a really hard ticket to be able to get on your show, and I just feel really privileged to be able to spend some time with you. Anything you do, you know I want to be a part of. So, so too with the JUSTUS dialogue. So really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today.
Yes, thank you. No, well, you were our first choice, and we were able to secure our first choice for this fireside chat, and so we're really excited. I want to talk a little bit about the work of Johns Hopkins, the journey that you have been on as president, your journey before becoming president, which I think in many ways encapsulates a lot of what you talk about in your book. So in your book, you make a strong argument for the importance of institutions like Johns Hopkins in a democracy. What is it about democracy that should motivate all of us to take a stand?
So thanks for a really great question. And I'll do my best to answer this somewhat succinctly. But obviously, this is a core issue that I've really been grappling with, of course, during the writing of the book, but well before. And I think it's really important in this moment to make the case for democracy, because right now, democracy is on its heels around the world. And we look need look no further than Ukraine, where citizens are engaged in actual combat for their right to self-governance through democratic expression. We know from research that even in spite of their failings in the US and around the globe, democracies are empirically better for citizens than autocracies. Of course, we have to think of all the historic advances in political rights that democracy has helped usher in, from the civil rights movement to marriage equality. And it's also true that democracy has shown empirically to bring about better health, more happiness, more prosperity. So democracies see higher increases in GDP per capita than autocracies. They enroll more citizens in school and spend more on education. And democratic citizens have higher, longer life expectancies. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen once said that no substantial famine has ever occurred in a democracy. So we know of the many profound injustices that have occurred in democracies and in democracy's name, but we also know that the evidence overwhelmingly shows that democracy matters and that we should do all that we can to preserve and improve it.
Yeah, so the points, the data that you just cite to, the improvements that are happening for individuals in their lives, as we talk about economic justice, democracy being a vehicle through which such things occur. But you also talk about universities and the university being critical institutions. Can you talk about why in particular you believe that universities are critical institutions when we talk about democracy?
So universities like Hopkins are woven into the fabric of American democracy. And we shouldn't underestimate their impact as critical institutions for the flourishing of democracy. Today, there's nearly 4,000 institutions of higher education in the United States, which employ about 1.5 million faculty members and educate about 20 million students. And they perform a number of different functions, many of which contribute to the democratic project. Now, in my book, I really thought it was important to be able to detail the ways in which universities are implicated as a core institution in democracy. And, often politicians, political scientists will talk about the key institutions that are the bedrock of democracy. And they'll think about courts, independent courts, independent and vigorous media that can hold power to account. They'll think about the importance of democratic legislatures and competitive politics, all being important to support democracy. But I think universities are an institution on par with a number of these other institutions, although we don't talk about that nearly as much as we should. And there's several reasons for that. One is that universities are really critical for social mobility, because these are the institutions that launch students up the socioeconomic ladder. They are places where students are educated in the values, history, skills, and aspirations necessary for good democratic citizenship, so they can advocate for themselves and their communities and be full participants in governance. Universities are places that are dedicated to truth and fact-finding, and they are the place where, with all the claims to false facts and fake news and so forth, they're the places where ultimately we're committed to truth and to fact, and where our ability to identify facts, to proclaim them or certify them as facts, and to use our expertise in the service of that function can all combine to ensure that we can be able to effectively check power, whether it's power in government or power in business or power in other sectors of our society. Again, it's a university that has a distinct role in that regard. And finally, universities are really important places for fostering pluralism, because in a world where increasingly in the United States we're so balkanized and people tend to associate to be around the people who share similar political views, sometimes share the same racial or socioeconomic characteristics. There's just not enough interplay across all these groups in society. And we know this is the thesis of the Great Separation. We know that Dems are living in certain parts of the country, Republicans in other parts, and we're increasingly becoming geographically separated. But the one thing that we know is that universities are a place where for at least 4 years as undergraduates, we pull people from across the country together where they have to live with each other and they can't resort to the classic enclaves that they have grown up in. And so we think that's really an important role, again, that universities like the military play in, again, fostering a sense of heterogeneity and pluralism and being able to foster the benefits of that kind of interaction. In each of these ways, I think colleges and universities support and sustain our democracy. But I also think that in the last several decades, as much as we have done to advance a number of parts of our mission, I think there are critical places in which we faltered in the full execution of these roles and responsibilities. And most importantly, I believe that we need to be providing additional resources to students to succeed in college without having to bear the burden of debt. We need to ensure that all students of ability and passion can access the benefits of higher education. And we need to do more to teach our students about democracy and to bring students together across differences of background and belief in a way that I mentioned a moment ago. And we need to be making sure that the best ideas of our faculty are available to those who could use them to the benefit of our society.
Absolutely. And I took down notes from what you just talked about, those 4 real highlights of the points, right? Social mobility, education, those invaluables, the dedication to truth and fact finding, pluralism. How would you say that our universities, and we know, as I said in your bio, Johns Hopkins is need blind and no loan for undergraduates. But how would you think universities, as a part of society, how are they fulfilling or not fulfilling on that promise?
So, let's take an example of something that has been really important to me, and that's around social mobility. So, as much as we see the potential for universities to be this great sort of talent identification agent, that we have the ability to truly embody the ideals of equal opportunity, that where there's a student who's got the demonstrated aspiration and has shown academic achievement, has made the best out of the high school experience, whatever that experience is, that they've really taken full advantage of it. You want to be able to identify those students and say, it's a level playing field. If you've got merit and aspiration, you should be able to get into a place like Johns Hopkins, and you should be able to get all of the economic and social benefits, personal benefits beyond just simply economic benefits from being part of a university and being able, if you decide later on upon graduation to go into a profession or into further advanced study, you should be able to do that. And we should be doing that just on the basis of the raw merits of people's talents. And yet, we know from the work that's been done by economist Raj Chetty that there are so many hurdles that stand in the way of students from disadvantaged backgrounds getting into the universities. And we have to deal with a very grim reality that there are 40 top universities in the United States where there are more students from the top 1% of the socioeconomic distribution than from the bottom 60% of the distribution. 40 universities of the top universities who are in that place. And so, that's a place where we see that despite the power of what universities can do in terms of fostering social mobility, we know the magic of what a university can do in terms of changing so much for the student comes in, of course, for his or her family. And yet we have this grim reality that it still is something that fosters privilege over the merits. And so what can we do about that? I think one of the things that obviously is really important is you've got to have recruitment programs that are very effective in reaching out to the most talented students irrespective of where they've gone to high school. If they're in rural America and their high school has just not had a sort of a history of sending students off to higher education, and particularly to a place like Hopkins, you got to find ways to get to those students and to develop outreach programs to bring them in. A lot of these schools, like we see in Baltimore City, don't have great guidance counseling. So you got to figure out other ways in which you're going to be able to present yourself to those students. And then, of course, you've got to assure them wherever these students are, whether in urban America or rural America, whether in certain concentrated groups by race or ethnicity, you've got to get the message out that there's a path to a place like Hopkins, and more than that, that there's a financial aid to fully support their involvement so that they know that they can come and tuition is taken care of, and their room and board as well, that the lack of financial resources is not going to be a bar to their involvement. So I think this is an area where, as much as we've done in terms of building pools of financial aid funds and focusing on these issues, I think there's a lot of institutions that are still struggling to be able to provide the necessary resources to prospective students. And then I think the other thing that, you'll know, Alicia, that I felt quite strongly about, and we made important moves with our board of trustees to do at Hopkins, is that we ended a practice that far too many of our peers are still utilizing in the United States. And that is that we are no longer giving any benefit whatsoever to your status as a legacy at Johns Hopkins, meaning that in contrast to other institutions where there's a thumb on the scale for students whose parents or grandparents are graduates of the institution, we refuse to take that into account. And the students who are the children or the grandchildren of alums who come to Johns Hopkins get in on their own merits. There's no advantage. And again, this is another area where a number of our peer institutions are continuing to use legacy admissions. And again, admissions are a zero-sum game. If you let more students in with a certain kind of background, it means that there's less places for other students. And this is an area where a lot of institutions put very significant benefit on that legacy status, and that crowds out the ability of students from more disadvantaged backgrounds to get into university. So that's just one place in which I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and which I think we've been fortunate at Hopkins to be able to play a role.
No, and I love how you really go through really practical things that universities can do to really impact economic justice. The removal of legacy as a determining factor in your being able to come to an elite institution. The fact that the child that sits in rural Montana and the child that sits in inner city Baltimore, regardless of those things that were part of like the birth lottery, don't inhibit your ability to access something that's going to ultimately impact social mobility. I think those are just really key points. And I'd love to pivot from that conversation to a question around, I know it's something, an area of importance, something that is not only on your mind, but I know that you push and you prod us on, is diversifying our leadership and diversifying our workforce. And so how do you think the university plays a critical role? Hopkins Local came far before I came to Johns Hopkins. I have watched your C-suite be so, diversified just over the past, 3 years. The cabinet just is brimming with brilliance. And I know the intentionality that as you've undertaken to do that. How do you think a university plays a role in that as well?
So, it starts off with, it's so blindingly obvious, but, you have to say it again and again and again. And it's just the foundation for everything is, the sense that if you're really committed to excellence, you can't get there when you are not finding the very best talent out there in society. Yeah. And so, this almost, it's a mantra of diversity and excellence go hand in hand. I mean, it's so foundational that if you really have the passion as I do, and I know so many of us in leadership at Hopkins do, for the idea that we should be excellent in everything we do, you want to have a sense of preeminence in so many different fields of our endeavors, that we're not just, at the top, but at the very top, not just in in the top 20%, but really, achieving a level of excellence that leaves us unrivaled. You got to, particularly in a place like a university, you can only get there if you're getting the very best talent that's available to you nationally and internationally. And, I think first and foremost, nationally, there are so many impediments, again, historically, that have stood in the way of us being able to benefit from the enormous reservoir of talent that exists in a number of different communities. So for me, there's a moral justice, there's an imperative to honor the idea that people of merit deserve the opportunity to be able to enter our institutions, whether as students or faculty or staff, and to be able to flourish there and to become all that they can be. And there's an obligation to see as leaders that we're able to do that. But at another level, it's a more selfish level for the institution. If you believe in excellence and you want to have greatness, you got to do it. So you may, if someone is not moved by the moral story, and the urgency of doing that, then I would say to them, but do you really like excellence? And if they can ultimately see themselves in the pursuit of diversity just to achieve that excellence, and that's okay. The thing is, we just got to get people to understand that the drive for excellence requires that we find the very best talent that we can anywhere. And look, again, at Hopkins, it's been really striking. Early on, when we talked about barriers to enrollment that were facing students from underrepresented minorities, from low socioeconomic status families, and so forth. And, I think most people whom I talked with sort of grudgingly acknowledge, yeah, there's probably something you can do there. This is probably an issue you should worry about. But there was a lot of, but you're gonna, at some point, you got to make sure you don't compromise excellence. And I kept saying, we're trying to get, broaden our gaze and make it easy for the very best people to get here. And yet, there were still people who had some, trepidation on that. And what's wonderful is just to see the extent to which we have achieved record diversity at Hopkins. And, the truth was 15 years ago, we were at the lower end of our peer group in terms of our diversity. We're now at the very top of that group, but significantly, we're at a place now where at one time, 2014, even we're about 20% of our student body, 22% of our student body was from URM backgrounds. Now we're at 36%. But significantly, while we've achieved this dazzling increase in diversity, we've also hit real strides in terms of the caliber of the class, in terms of its academic achievement. So the class in 2010 was ranked about 27th in the country on just standard GPA, SAT, and ACT scores and so forth. We're now number 2 or 3. It varies year by year.
Wow.
But again, so you were able to demonstrate very clearly that we can do both. You can, in fact, in order to be able to really be serious about the excellence move, you have to recruit the very best talent. It doesn't work otherwise. So again, the nice thing is that people who were somewhat skeptical, when you just share those statistics, they say, that makes sense. And so again, I think it's important in terms of the pool of talent you bring into the institution. And then quite frankly, it's important that you don't have monolithic thinking in an institution. You want to have people who bring different perspectives and backgrounds, so that when you're looking at an issue that, all of us have our, predisposed ways to thinking about it. And it's great to be challenged by people who have a different view of different lived experience and who can, in some sense, have the ability to challenge, to test your views so that we can get to a better place. And again, there's a fairly robust literature that shows teams that are diverse just perform better, like they generate better outcomes. So this shouldn't be surprising. So for all these reasons, this is, I think, something that I see as really important. And, you mentioned, as much as I've been talking about undergraduate education, we are so excited about this Vivian Thomas Scholars Program and the fact that as much as we'd be able to do on the undergraduate side, we're now going to be able to do that with at the PhD level in STEM education. And this has been an area where people have long lamented the loss of talent that just, people start off in high school, have a love of science, but then they don't go into sciences in university, their first degree, their undergraduate degree. But those who do end up not going to PhD programs, or those who get through all these hurdles and still are in a PhD program and graduate from it, then for whatever reason don't come back onto the faculty or don't go into industry. And so again, we're just determined to have a demonstration project here that, much in the way that we were able to show with the undergraduate program, that with intentionality and imagination, you can really change the talent pool in a way that has very significant benefits for our society.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'd love to get to this question around diversity in wealth building. We just had a panel at noon about investments, and we talked about the wealth building that is generated, the social mobility. Hold on, everyone, before I get there, I want to make sure everyone listening on the phone, like a radio program, you can text your questions in 22333, type JHUWL. You can engage in the chat with Ron and me. You also can put them on Facebook and on YouTube. We have a team in the background that's capturing all of those, and they're going to provide them to us. But how do you think that this intentionality, this focus, this belief grounded in the fact that excellence is bred by diversity leads to diverse wealth building? What has been your vision around that as a corollary, as a byproduct, as an outcome from this adherence?
So look, it's such an important issue because we often tend to think about the starting salaries for our students on graduation, and so you think about what happens in terms of the magic of higher education, and then it equips you to get better salaries, more job security than if you didn't receive a university degree. So we know that, and we talk a lot about salaries. But when you think about the very significant wealth deficits that exist in this country, particularly across race, and it's staggering just to see the disparity between average white and Black wealth in this country. It's another dimension. Of course, it reflects the disparity in salaries that reflects decades, if not centuries, of discrimination. But it also has such a significant impact on how you think about what you can do for your children, the kind of economic stability you have, the kind of sense of confidence you have in a society. And so for all these reasons, I think that as much as we are focused on building human intellectual capability and seeing that translate into jobs and income, you got to think also about the wealth piece of this and think about, again, how we, for instance, in our, for a lot of our staff and faculty have taken advantage of grants to live near where you work. This is something where, again, it recognizes that for most people, the principal source of wealth that they will have in their lives is their homes. And you want to make people homeowners and let them, particularly as we now seem to be entering an inflationary period, that they have the benefit of of having an asset that will appreciate in value. And it's more than just simply their labor that gives them, the ability to achieve a level of economic security. So in setting up a program like Live Near Your Work, it was done at one level to encourage staff and faculty to buy homes and to be able to participate in this appreciation of wealth, which we know has been so important in terms of wealth creation in this country. And at the same time, it would do great things for us in terms of being able to support the neighborhoods around us. So that's one example of ways in which we have some intentionality. I think as well, thinking about just all the work that you and others have been doing around thinking about economic innovation and the social innovation hubs, and trying to, with the Goldman Sachs program and others, trying to get people to set up companies to essentially take risks on wealth creation for themselves and for society, that again will give them just greater confidence. And ultimately, we know the cycle that if we can make some of our entrepreneurs successful, then they in turn can invest more in expansion of their businesses, which creates more jobs, which creates a tax base. So we know the virtuous circle, but it needs a level of wealth to be able to get this all started. And we know that just centuries of discrimination, redlining, and so forth have really impaired the ability to create equal opportunity here. So we just, again, have to be intentional in how we think about remedying that.
Yeah, and as you talked, I was thinking about the intentionality, which sort of was ahead of its time when launched, which was Hopkins Local. And the commitment around that investment. And so this question has come in, which is, why did you say at this moment in time, when you could have said, we can make an investment in X or Y, or we can make a commitment, did you make a commitment around economic inclusion? So this is 2015. We know that the work happened much before, but why was economic justice, economic inclusion, sort of the focus and in many ways the outgrowth of the best minds on how we impact Baltimore?
It's a great question, Alicia. I think it started first and foremost with a recognition that had been underway, that a recognition on our part that we weren't doing all that we could to stimulate local business, to create opportunities for employment from residents of Baltimore. And, I think it's been part of the evolution of how Hopkins takes serious this idea that we are deeply rooted in Baltimore, and that you've got to think about ways in which in every activity you're involved in, how can you strategically use decisions that are made every day around purchasing, investments, recruitment of people into the institution, and how can you take those everyday decisions made by thousands of people throughout a 60,000 plus person organization, and how can you get them thinking about how can I do what I need to do for my line of business, but how can I do it in a way that also has derivative benefit for Baltimore, for the city of which we're part. So that recognition was there, and we were doing work on thinking about the possibilities for a comprehensive program that would focus on directing a portion of our spend to local businesses, to think about strategic hiring of people from some of the most disadvantaged neighborhoods in the city, giving them entry into employment, and particularly for those returning citizens. Again, thinking about this as a great way to break the cycles in the city. And so we were thinking about all of that and ways in which we could do that. And again, wanted to do it in a way that would be credible, that we didn't, express a lofty aspiration and then find that we didn't deliver the goods, and you just raise expectations, and then ultimately people are skeptical when they see that there's a lofty speech but no follow-up. So we wanted to get all that right, and then Freddie Gray happened, and I think for a lot of us, it was a moment that was just really galvanizing and create a sense of urgency that we just can't go on like that. And when you looked at just the rage in the city, there were so many things that were being expressed clearly about policing and criminal justice, but it's so much more than that, that we started to see things that were in some sense hidden in plain sight. And at least for me, it was a sense of saying, okay, we're the largest private employer in city and state. We've got a role here that we can play, that we don't have to ask anyone for permission to do. We can just do it. So like, what can we just do and make a difference? And that's how we entered into the Hopkins local program. And it's been amazing, of course, because the story of when we did that, then having other partners who saw this and said, well, if Hopkins can do it, then we can do it as well. And I think it was a really exciting and hopeful moment, which again, what's been important is it's now under your leadership, but it's institutionalized. It's bred in the bone of the place, and there's no going back. And it's only figuring out ways in which, okay, as much as we've done, how do we set more ambitious goals? How do we bring more people in? How do we do this better? Because again, we know that the economic opportunity issue is the key challenge for the city, and it's the root cause of so many of our problems. We've got to figure out how we can help address that. No, absolutely. And I was, I share with all viewers, but, and Ron his leadership has been tremendous in this regard. We've been holding so many things. We get to go deeper and wider in this work around economic injustice. Last Saturday, we had over 250 people receive expungements down at the convention center in partnership. We had Johns Hopkins local hire team there helping people apply, getting into jobs. We had people removing the barrier of their IDs and talking with our veterans about how do you get employment, but how do you make sure you get all of the services? And so I just think, it's important. I think people will take away from this discussion just the realness of the work to touch the ground, to be in the ivory, to have the tower, because the tower is not going away, but to touch the ground in a way that people living in Baltimore not just see us, but feel us in their daily lives. And I'm so indebted to you, Alicia, and the ways that you've brought such imagination. Again, there's things that we foundations that we've been able to lay, but just things like that again, it goes to the benefits of fresh blood, enormous talent coming into our institution. But that was, we didn't think about something like the role that Hopkins can play in expungement, and then putting it together with a job fair. It's genius. It's like it's concierge levels, approach where you can really get at people and make it easy for them to move beyond the unfair burdens that they face. And so I love it. And by the way, I just want to say, I'm so excited that although I am not able to practice, I'm a lapsed lawyer from Canada, but you have told me that you will get me into the expungement clinic next year. And I spoke to Joanne, my wife, who's also at Hopkins, and we're both really excited to be there. In fact, I'm going to enlist some of my kids as well, so who are legally trained, who don't need, who are able to practice in the States. So we're all in. We think this is great. Yeah, no, and you know what? I get to do this great work, but it really is because of great leadership that allows for you to think about the tool and the platform and the role of a university in really solving real concrete problems in our community. And so just thank you for your leadership. I get to be wildly creative because I have a boss that says you can be wildly creative to solve problems. And so I take that license, and it is great. To talk about that creativity, I want to have you talk a little bit about Henderson Hopkins, because it is the first school, like I said in your bio, built in 20 years in East Baltimore. It is a crown jewel. I am blessed to get to go and visit it and see the direct impact and the leadership of its Principal Peter Canham. Can you talk a little bit about why
Johns Hopkins invested in Henderson Hopkins. That's not a sure bet. When you get in the case, it's a different thing. And how just the amount of investment that we've made to ensure that a young child living in East Baltimore that can literally see our university has opportunity to a really high quality education, and ultimately can think about Hopkins as a part of their educational journey.
So, look, this has been truly joyful. Seeing that school go up and getting to the point where finally it really seems to be firing all cylinders under just a tremendously gifted principal. It started off. It was literally my first week at Hopkins that we had the large 88-acre East Baltimore Development Initiative, and somewhere in those 88 acres, at some point in time, the folks at EBDI said, we got to build a school, and that's part of the vision for this project. And I asked at that time, I said, well, what's the relationship of the school to Johns Hopkins? And they said none whatsoever. It's not meant to be affiliated with Johns Hopkins. We don't think that's the right thing to do. And it'll get done at some point in time. But and probably at the northwestern part of the 88 acres. And I had just come from University of Pennsylvania, where the university had, over a period of about 15 years, really rethought fundamentally its relationship with the West Philly community in a way that it was very acrimonious, very distrustful of one another. There were clear boundaries between university and community, and ultimately, the university and the community, but particularly the university, recognized that this is just not a winning strategy. You can't behave this way. You can't have these boundary lines. We're all part of the same community. And so too, once they made that recognition, then it was pretty clear that one of the things that the university could do to really invest in the community was to support the creation of a public school in West Philadelphia. And so this school, the Sadie Alexander School that's in West Philadelphia, became a demonstration project for what is possible with a university-city collaboration in public education. And I saw this and saw how successful it was, so that when I got to Hopkins, and I thought, the enormous good fortune, we're saying that we're going to build a school, and it's going to be in this 88 acres, which is really close proximity to the university and to the health system. And was thinking, like, how can we let this opportunity pass? And it was, Nia Redmond, who we've honored in so many different contexts, but I wasn't sure that I'd get any community support for Hopkins playing a role on this. And I talked at an early meeting about this idea, and the success of Sadie Alexander School at the University of Pennsylvania in West Philadelphia. And it was Nia Redmond who said, if it's good enough for Philadelphia, why the heck is it going to happen in Baltimore? And she said, Mr. President, she said, you better do something similar for East Baltimore. And that just changed everything. And so the school, is 98% free and reduced lunch. It has a student population that looks like many schools in Baltimore, but it is in a incredible facility with an incredible principal and teaching faculty, and lots of support from the university, and an institution, a school that sees itself as a true community school. During COVID, it became the site where millions of free meals were given out. It's really dedicated to the idea that's going to provide a place for kids to achieve all their academic talents, but at the same time, it really understands that kids are part of families and family configurations, and the whole unit has to be supported. And so, again, it's been not a perfectly flat road to success. It's had lots of bumps and hurdles along the way. But the last couple of years, and particularly before COVID, what the school's leadership has really been focused on, along with Chris Morfer, our Dean of the School of Engineering, and Peter Canham as principal, but is saying we want to be the place in Baltimore that increases as much as possible the performance of kids. So wherever they start from, we want to be the school that does the most to increase their capabilities. And that's what the measure should be, not whether everyone ends at this level, but whether each student has achieved the maximum improvement. And it's a really exciting idea. And again, before the pandemic, we were seeing very significant, dazzling increases in the performance of the kids in the school. Obviously, COVID's a real setback, and we're thinking and worrying a lot about that. And in particular, worrying about how we're going to deal with the deficit in educational opportunity that kids have had over the last 2 years during COVID. So again, but all parts of the university are in this. We got the lacrosse team out there. Kids are doing, undergraduates are doing tutoring. There's just no shortage of opportunities for the university to pour its emotional, intellectual, and financial resources into this place that carries our name.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And as you talk about that, you can tell that this is joy work for you. It's hard work for you. That it's a part of the ethos of thinking about being, like I said, like you often say, of Baltimore, and contributing in that way. I'd love to ask you this question, which and someone in the comments, and I see a lot of your comments, so keep putting the comments in. Don't worry, we'll get them all to Ron. He'll get all the comments, and I'm including them. Someone talked about doing the work. That was the comment, that it reflects doing the work. I'd love to talk to you about like the vision. Like, so what's next? So like, as we think about economic justice, universities, what do you think is all of our sort of call to action as a part of this? And then I'm going to have you give a call to action to the myriad of us, of folks watching. But what do you think as a university our call to action is? What's the next frontier, do you think?
So it's funny when you look back at what at least I've been able to work with others on over the last decade plus that I've been lucky enough to be here in Baltimore at Hopkins. I would say there are things that we've done that have really been sort of placemaking, focused on the neighborhoods around Homewood in the Homewood Community Partnerships Initiative, and some of the strategic investments that we've made with the 10 community organizations around improving schools, getting at some of the buildings that had fallen into disrepair and bringing back park space, green space, and so forth, things like that, and a host of other related initiatives. And of course, in East Baltimore, the massive project that was EBDI that we now call Eager Park, and all that's been entailed with that, including the creation of the park at the center. So that really these placemaking functions, which are really important and we will continue to do. At the same time, there's things that we've been able to do, like the economic inclusion with Hopkins Local, but thinking about things that we've been able to do with the Baltimore City school system or with public health during and before the pandemic, all of these things, again, where what you're trying to think about is how do we use the gifts that we have at Hopkins and how can we basically share them with our partners in the city? And, we're not another level of government. We're not the city. So you got to think about like, what are the things where we have particular capacity to really be able to share, and in sharing and forging partnerships makes us better at our job too, as we're able to work with and learn from our community partners. Having said that, a lot of these things are external to the university. And I think one of the things that is really important in the next stage of doing things to improve the city, to strengthen the city of which we're a part, I think we need a period of time where we focus on staff at the university.
Mhm.
And when you think about Johns Hopkins, we have more than 20,000 employees who are residents of the city of Baltimore.
Yeah.
And so, given that we've got with the largest employer, we've got all these folks here at Hopkins who are doing roles, doing functions, have interaction with lots of different areas of the university, but ask the question of, if we really wanted to make a difference in their lives and to do much better in terms of not just being able to identify the talent that brings them to the university, but giving real opportunity to advance their capabilities in light of their talents, to get training and mentorship, or get better and more prophylactic healthcare around managing diabetes or smoking cessation, or thinking about things that, like you've started with, children of our employees who are thinking about university and may not have good guidance counselors, and could we offer that kind of advice and support? So we take a multi-generational view. Our employees are critical players, but they're not sole actors, and we think about their families as well. And so if Hopkins could really, in the way that I describe in other things we do, where we take our distributed capabilities and we marshal them around a goal, could we do something similar and take seriously that with all the strengths we have, we can do things for our employees that few other employers could? And a Walmart or a motor company, they just don't have the health and educational capabilities that live at Hopkins. So if we could get really serious about that, I think we could do great things for the city. So in a way, again, I'm threading the needle for doing the right thing, but also in a way, it's kind of a selfish thing. We want great employees. We want to be a great organization. We want to get the most that we can from their potential capabilities. And so investing in them is morally right, but it's a selfish thing to do. It makes our organization better. And so I'd really like to see us focus on that. I think that's the next dimension for the development of our city agenda, is actually doing good for the city by focusing at home.
I agree. It is. And I know we are on the pathway, but I think as a part of this conversation, that sort of focus that you just put on us as we think about economic justice, I think it was just a really great one for us to launch off of. We know that we have a diverse audience today. We have elected officials, we have students, we have faculty, we have CEOs from a number of corporations watching. We have seniors watching, residents. What is the advice? What is the call to action as we think about economic justice? We've had panels on education, entrepreneurship, investments, healthcare. What do you think is the call to action for all of us as we think about economic justice?
I think for me, it's a determination to take a goal, take a project, and just drive it hard. To move beyond the sort of vague aspiration, but to thinking about, what can we do concretely tomorrow? What can we do to materially change, maybe in a very small way, but something that's material and impactful that can really contribute to a change in the trajectory of the city. So, after Freddie Gray, we really went hard on economic inclusion and the Hopkins local and expedited the rollout of it, got clear targets, and subjected ourselves to outside evaluation to make sure that we were doing what we said we wanted to do. Another thing that, to my mind, was really powerful was Vision for Baltimore. And just this idea that we took a concrete problem, and you know the story, Alicia, that kids in Baltimore City public schools at several points during their educational trajectory will get tested for their vision. But terribly ironically, despite the fact that we know they failed the vision test, the significant percentage of the students weren't getting prescription glasses at the end of that. And we know, like, if a kid can't see the board, you know what that does to their educational performance, but even their social interactions. If the world is blurry, it creates hesitancy. And insecurity. And so we know this is foundational. And so it's just such a simple thing. We don't have glasses for kids. We know the kids that need them. We know the prescription they need. How can we just fix that? And so, together with the city health commissioner and Sonia Santelises, we basically just decided we're going to fix this. It was a small thing, but what was important was that we just said, this is not going to take years. We're going to do this in weeks, and we got it done. We got foundation support. We got all the permissions we needed, and Warby Parker, which was run by a graduate of ours, provided the glasses. It was a beautiful thing. And so 64,000 kids have been tested. 8,000 kids in Baltimore now have 2 sets of eyeglasses by virtue of this program. I emphasize this because so often in Baltimore, I find we get overwhelmed with all the things we have to worry about and all the interrelationships that, can you get, if you fix this problem, don't you also have to fix this problem and then fix that problem? And then it actually becomes paralyzing. For me, I think that just wherever people live, do something that is just concrete, that's manageable, and just get it done. Because when you do that one thing, it leads to the next thing and the next thing, and creates confidence and momentum. And I think that's really what we lack at times. And I just think just the determination to cut through the bureaucracy, to cut through the lethargy, and just get stuff done is really important. So whatever that it is, I hope I and others will be faithful to the idea that we embrace a project and just get it done, and don't let all the naysayers slow you down. And just, I think if we can let all of the kinds of initiatives that people are hankering to do, and even though we don't have a solution for every problem, just, I think getting those things done, those small things done, give you the capacity and the confidence and the momentum to go after bigger things. Like glasses. Glasses are small, but they're huge. And then it's leading to other, collaborations and initiatives that we're doing with the city. But it started just with glasses, kind of obvious.
Yep. No, I think I appreciate what you said. It reminds me of something my father used to say all the time, that big things count, but little things mount. And so whether you are doing the big things that you see, count, the little things mount to,
I love that,
to huge things that can happen in our community. Let me say this. It has been an absolute pleasure always to talk with you, Ron, but to have this fireside chat and to have it be the culminating activity for our Justice Dialogues has been wonderful. And thank you for your leadership and your vision, which I'm so glad you got to talk about today. And thank you for the things you've done in the past, and thank you for what you will do in the future, in partnership with so many others. But
and particularly with you, Alicia.
That's right.
We're stuck with each other.
Yes.
Hey, this was terrific, and thank you, and all the folks who are here with us. It's just so, again, so encouraging to me to know that this network exists, and that great ideas are being shared and aspirations unleashed. And I know this takes us into a good direction. So thank you.
Excellent. Let me close us out with just saying thank you, Ron. Thank you to the entire team that has brought this to fruition. Let me give huge shout outs. Audrey Johnson, thank you for your leadership. Marissa McKeever, Isabel Adler, Jackie Bryan, Jackie C, Kimi, Genevieve, our friends at V Fairs, Ritza. We have just had a tremendous team that has brought this all together, including your team, Rihanna and Rachel, just helping us get this all to fruition. I want to thank Johns Hopkins University, Johns Hopkins Health System, Microsoft, our sponsors, Goldman Sachs, 10,000 Small Businesses, the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce, Buy Black. Thank you for being a sponsor. Johns Hopkins Health Education and Training Corps, Hopkins Local. Thank all of our speakers that have participated over the course of the past 3 weeks. Thank you, Ron. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate your attendance and wish you all the best as we continue to work together around economic justice.